Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to this BCS webinar. And this is a super webinar. We have got a great subject for you, and you can see on screen the slide about today's webinar. My name is Darling. I'm chairman of BCS North London and Central London branches, super groups of people in a super organization, the Chartered Institute for IT. I hope you're a member of BCS. If not, please do check out how to become a member and come and join this great community. It's a community of many, many different groups, all around the world of IT, but all focused on different subjects. You can see on the screen that sometimes it mentions BCS Green IT Specialist Group right now. It also mentions BCSWomen, and also these branches, which are Central London or North London branches and are geographic branches. And in BCS, the wonderful matrix of the organization allows you to join more than one group according to you, which is all really fantastic. And we have people from a number of the groups here today. And notably, of course, from North London, Central London, and BCSWomen. So thank you very much for coming. I'm going to let this play through one more time, and then we'll go into today's event the next time Sharon slide appears on the screen. But meanwhile, I hope that you can see that we've got a cornucopia of computing for you in September. A positive plethora of topics and great subjects, all to do with IT. So the colors you can see on the screen, there's a lot of green there, isn't there? The reason for that is that I believe that in September, at the late part of September, we have Great Big Green Week. So for that, we're doing two events. One of them is about the Mayflower, which is basically a robot vessel that is going to go across the Atlantic collecting information. And also we have another one, which we'll see in a minute. Meanwhile, at the end of the month, here's something which I hope you'll attend, but that you don't get, and that is ransomware. Ransomware, pay or pray? Well, that's a choice that unfortunately a number of organizations have had to face up to. I hope yours is not one of them, but we will have a look and listen to Sarah Armstrong-Smith of Microsoft telling us much more about that. Here we are. Here is one of our eco sessions on the screen now. And this organization, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, is a truly wonderful organization that is mapping and monitoring the health of our species and various other species, whether they're plants or animals. This is the slide about the Mayfair, and there is a picture of the autonomous vessel that's going across the Atlantic in order to collect information, scientific information about pollution, environment, the climate, and so on. There's the ransomware one again, and I hope you will sign up and join us at these events. But meanwhile, let's come back to tonight. And tonight, we have not only Sharon with us, but also we have our presenter, our interviewer, Chloe. And meanwhile, you may be able to hear that in the background, I've got a cat, our cat Marmalade. So whilst I deal with her, let me ask, Chloe, what have you got for us today? Over to you, Chloe.
Hi, everyone, and thank you very much to Sharon for being here as well today. So to kickstart this Q&A, maybe it'd be great, Sharon, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and also your current role at IBM.
Yeah, sure. So hi folks. I'm sorry, I was just getting confused by the screen. I'm wondering if we can maybe fantastic. Then I get to see Chloe instead of the charts, which is really rather nice, a bit more personal. So yeah, so anyway, that was a long bit of gubbins. Sharon Moore, so fancy job title, CTO for public sector in IBM. That is part of my job. My job is focusing on policing and public safety in particular. I've had a rather long career at IBM, but done lots of different jobs as part of it. So if anyone thinks that I'm completely blue washed, there's maybe an element of truth in that. But I do like to think I've seen a bit of the world as well. And partnering is really important to any kind of success, particularly in public sector. So actually, spent a lot of time working with other organisations that are not IBM, not the one that I work for on a day-to-day basis.
Great, thank you very much. And if we kind of go maybe into a little bit about your career and your experience at IBM, and maybe also sort of further back, have there been any sort of challenges you've faced in your career? And can you tell us a little bit about those and maybe how you've overcome them as well?
Yeah, sure. Why don't I start a little bit more just about my role, because I realised I kind of skipped over that. But part of the reason I do what I do now is partly because of some of the challenges that I faced as well, because I think they've led to who I am, and the sort of things that I'm really interested in and the approach that I take. So part of my role is very much about being that technology thought leader or that technical thought leader. So where is technology going, and how can we marry what the capabilities of technology with what the public sector is needing, because that is my focus. But also, actually, where does public sector need to go, and how do we need to influence how technology is shaped, if that makes sense, so that it can meet the needs. So it's kind of looking at the role from two directions. So you'll find me as a bit of an evangelist into IBM and out of IBM, on the sort of things that we all need to be doing, and the benefits of bringing technology to public sector organisations, whether that is around about public safety or whether that is a wider approach. I spent quite a bit of my time last year working on things like understanding how we can deal with technical debt, because, as will be no surprise to many people, public sector is absolutely full of it, and the way that the public sector is budgeted and has spending reviews and that kind of thing actually makes it very difficult to deal with things like technical debt, and really being able to focus on that and being able to make a difference there. So that's some of the things that I do now. My role is very much about understanding research. It's about collaboration. It's about community and speaking to a lot of people, listening to a lot of people. Listening is probably the more important part than the speaking part, actually. It's a bit about asking the hard questions. I learned a lot of that from other people, as I've had in a career as an architect, and had some really good mentors who formally and informally who have taught me how to ask a good question, ask a hard question, the what ifs, and that sort of thing. And I've kind of got to this role through a number of things that I've had to face, I guess, as maybe as challenges. So one of them is being remote, right? Which, and we've all suffered from. Is that the right word? Well, it's something we've all had to deal with in the last year or so. So I am based in Edinburgh. I used to be in London nearly every week, which is why I'm quite familiar, friendly with the North London branch, Central branch. Because I would come to their events rather than some of the ones in Scotland, because it was easier for me. But being in Edinburgh, and really choosing to make a home here, having family that need my help that not that far away from here, meant that sometimes I wasn't visible, that kind of thing. So one of the things I did about that is get involved in things that the technical community, particularly within IBM, but not always within IBM, the technical community might be doing. So projects and initiatives that are about furthering technology, about improving the way that we govern in technology, and that kind of thing. And that's one of the areas, by getting to meet lots of fantastic people and understanding what's going on and what the opportunities are, that's partly where I've got to where I am just now. One of the other challenges I've had is like being in the wrong bit of the business. So very early on, I was in part of the IBM business that helps me develop some really, really useful skills, but I found it less, I was going to say less exciting. That I don't mean that to be a negative to the folks that do. It just wouldn't float my boat, wasn't my kind of thing. So again, I was actually getting to know people to understand what the opportunities were and how I could move into something that really reflected my skills and my passion more. And that was a while ago. It's not actually the bit of the business I'm in now. I've moved on since then, but being able to do that again about getting to know people. And I think my last challenge, and you know what, I still have it right now, and that is finding the time to do all the things that I think are really interesting, and prioritizing properly and saying no. I am better at it. I am better than I was, but it's definitely still a challenge that I have to encounter and I have to deal with. And every now and again, I have to take a step back and reflect and all that kind of thing, and make sure that I'm working on the things that are right for me and the ones I can make a difference, and that I don't let people down, because that would actually, for me, that would be the worst thing of all, is letting people down, and that's a horrible place to be. So I think that's probably 3 challenges. There's probably more, but that's I think that was 3 that I wrote down when I was thinking about this.
Definitely relate to them, and yeah, definitely seen the importance of getting to know people, especially in these big companies. I think there are a lot of opportunities you don't know about until you talk to people, just simply because there are so many, and they're not obviously all advertised in ways that you see day to day. So yeah, I think that's very key. Are there any techniques or anything you've learned that can help with the prioritization, maybe?
That's a really good question. I actually have a mentee that we talk to about this quite regularly. Hints and tips. So what are a lot of people talk about the one with the jar with the stones and the pebbles and the sand. You know, if you've got anything that's really important, make sure you're doing the big important things first, because it is really easy to fill your time with lots of little things and get to the point that you don't have time for the really big things. And the big things might not actually be huge in terms of effort, but it might be huge in terms of the impact that they're going to have. So I think that is always a particularly good thing as well. The other thing is there a way that you can get people involved? Now, I was very conscious, a lot of the things I committed to earlier in my career, and actually still now, but slightly different, were the extracurricular things, not your day job things. And that can be even more tricky, because you don't like to ask somebody else to help, because you're asking them to volunteer. But I started to realize that actually, if people are going to volunteer to get involved in something with you, if you have a general "will anyone help?" and nobody answers, well, they've joined the team for a reason. They either do want to make a difference, or make progress, or understand more about the problem, or whatever it might be. Actually, it is okay just to maybe occasionally put somebody on the spot and just ask them if they'll do it. That's quite uncomfortable. It was really uncomfortable at first, and I did once get feedback before I even started doing that, by the way, that I didn't seem to understand that people had full-time jobs to do as well, and I really took that to heart, which meant that any time I asked anyone to do anything, like specifically, I caveated it with a whole bunch of, "I appreciate you might be busy, you're allowed to say no, it's okay, but would you?" And I still do a little of that. But like I say, if people are volunteering to give their time, the worst thing they can do is say no when you say, "Actually, are you able to do this particular thing?"
Yeah. No, definitely. And in terms of other advice, are there any pieces of advice that you can share with our tips and tricks on how you can succeed in a career in tech as well?
Yeah, so my first one was networking, and it still is networking. Get to know people. The technology is there to help us. It can get in the way as well sometimes, but things like social media can be very useful. I would say put some time in your diary. You don't need to follow everything, and try not to get sucked into things that are not going to help you. That's quite hard sometimes when there's interesting things, but I think if you can use tools to network as well. I would say, from an inclusion perspective, it's actually the responsibility. If you're a team leader or a manager or that kind of thing, you might want to consider how you help people be visible, or how you reach out to people who perhaps are not being as visible as you think are perhaps should be. It's kind of a tricky one. Not everyone necessarily feels comfortable putting themselves forward to get involved in something, for example, and not everyone has time to, but some people don't necessarily, or they hope they'll be recognized. So I would say network and help other people to network as well. I've mentioned prioritization, learning. I wrote about everything, but that's never possible. But I would say continually learn. So new skills, new technologies, new industries, get to know people, just always be learning. And technology is such a fantastic place for that, that really it's not, I was going to say it's not forgivable. I certainly don't understand if you're not learning, because there's just so much. So I would say learn, and if you need to, prioritize what you learn so that you don't spend forever on Wikipedia or Google or or Stack Overflow or whatever it is that where you get sucked in, right? And the very last thing I've put here is question a lot. I wrote everything in a question mark as well. Should we be questioning everything? And I think maybe if we do that, we will never get anything done, or things won't come to a conclusion. But I think it is really important to question, to reflect. If you're an Agile fan, then obviously you've got things like retrospectives and, are we doing the right thing? Why are we doing this thing? Have we spoken to the right people? Are we thinking about our stakeholders? What might be the unintended consequences of this, particularly even if we're trying to do something that's the right thing? I think questioning really important, because there's always this thought, forgive me for asking this stupid question, and actually not that many questions are that stupid. I mean, I'm sure maybe some of our politicians have asked silly daft ones now and again, but let's not take it in that direction. I think questioning is a really useful skill. Don't necessarily take everything at face value. So I would suggest that.
Definitely they're great tips. And yeah, I think the questioning one is definitely important. Having sort of started my career, and again, starting a new role now, I mean, questioning everything, kind of really understanding how things work, I found incredibly useful, and people are always really happy to share advice as well, which is great. On actually the tips sort of side of things, we have a question from the audience from David Kinnan I thought maybe we can answer now. And it's advice on any advice for students who are starting their career journey.
Say that again, sorry, ask me that. I was just looking at trying to find the question.
No problem at all. It's just if you click on more and then Q&A, you'll get to them. But it's any advice or tips for students who are just starting their career journey.
Oh, that's a really good one. I think be really curious. There's a little bit of a buzzword at the moment, I think, in tech, but be really curious. Be bold. Speak to people. Reach out to people. There was a chap whose mother got in touch with a group of people, and I'm in Facebook, so it's a group that's in Edinburgh, and it's closed. It's a closed group, but there are thousands of people in there. And her son wanted to pursue a career in tech, and last year, obviously, things like work experience were really difficult because you couldn't get to the office. A lot of people weren't offering it, and he didn't really know what to do. So instead, what he did, and everyone could take this route if they wanted to, but just to throw out something a bit different. So he built his own questionnaire. Now we could get into some GDPR questions round about it, but most people park those. So he built his own questionnaire, and he asked his mum if she would circulate it, and she happened to pop it in this group. I picked it up. A couple of other women in tech picked it up as well, and by the end, I think he had something like 300 different people responded to his questionnaire about what it's like to work in tech. And he followed up. Some people had full-on conversations, and he got to speak to people in the US and all sorts of things. So yeah, be bold. Because as you've just said, Chloe, right? Most people want to help. It makes them feel good. But they actually, whether it's selfless or selfish, most people want to help. So they will point you in the right direction. They'll tell you about what you want to do. So yeah, be bold and go for it, and always try and pick technology that's really relevant, that kind of thing. I think ask people stories about how technology's made an impact as well, because that will help you maybe David think about about where you might focus your skills. I would say university is not for everybody, so there's lots of paths as well. Don't think that you have to be at university. I loved university, totally was the making of me. Well, maybe that's putting it a bit far. I'm not sure what people would think about me saying I was mate, but anyway, I really enjoyed it and it was great for me, but it's not for everybody, and there's so many other opportunities these days, what with apprenticeships and so on as well. So I guess the challenge is you could end up with 40 different opinions. So maybe find one or two that you really trust to give you a wee bit of guidance. Hopefully that was useful.
And also on the sort of alternative path to university, a lot of the big companies, I think, do qualifications now as well. So there's one that our company was offering to do your ACA, and a lot of people had finished it before we even arrived and started doing it. So there are definitely sort of perks to getting it done early and having the time to do that. Going to the inevitable topic of COVID, how has COVID impacted the public sector and tech in relation to the public sector?
Yeah, gosh, hasn't it been a real challenge? And it's going to be a real challenge going on for the public sector, because all that investment for furlough and so on, you know, it's got to come from somewhere. So it is going to be a continual and challenging. I think where tech has helped is around about things like digital transformation, automation. You can throw out lots of buzzwords here, right? But I think that understanding how we don't have enough time to do everything. We need to think about how we approach our tasks in a different way. I think the automation technology is making has made a difference there. Even things like virtual assistants, and I mean proper assistants. I don't just mean a chatbot that answers your FAQs, but ones that are actually able to go away and come back with something useful or connect you to the right people. So I think technology there, natural language from an AI perspective, that kind of thing, that's having an impact. Some of it's challenging. The technology behind the research and development of the vaccines, and also just understanding the virus and the disease and the longer term impacts, that kind of thing. You know, technology is absolutely crucial there. Whether it's the infrastructure that you need to use in order to do all that analysis, whether it is the software that supports the analysis, whatever it is, actually technology has had a huge role to play there, and has made a difference, because you know, where would we be without the vaccines, frankly. There's an ongoing role there, so further research. If anyone does follow me on Twitter, you'll see that I posted something on Monday. I get the regular newsletter from Caroline Criado Perez, who did the Invisible Woman a book, who wrote the Invisible Woman book, and she always shares stories about where women are forgotten, are not thought about, and actually there is a role here for technology where we start thinking about the data. We need to start thinking about gender and other diverse aspects and break down into more of that. Other things, even just things like virtual conferencing. I mean, what kind of role, where would we be if we didn't have Zoom? And I know, I think actually COVID's maybe been good for Zoom in terms of security and improved them and as a technology, but not just Zoom. There's obviously many. One of the things that IBM's did last year, doing again this year, is that we're providing the video conferencing technology for their excellence in policing conference, because they can't do it in person, and more is in person now than was before, but still there is some challenges. That I think IoT's made a difference as well, but one of the challenges we're going to keep dealing with is that technical debt side of things, and how do we, and particularly in public sector, how do we find the time and how do we find the money, the budget, in order to be able to deal with that technology? Because it's all very well bringing lots of new shiny things, but if they don't integrate with, they don't talk to the old stuff, we're still going to have challenges.
Yeah, definitely. Having seen the tech world change so much during my relatively short career, it would be great to see, I guess, kind of building on the COVID thing, if there are any big shifts that have happened, let's say in the last 5 years, that have especially affected the public sector and tech, in your view.
Yeah, I wrote a few things down here, because I think, things, what do we say? We always say this: technology changing at a pace it's never been at before, and it's getting faster and all that kind of thing. But I think things like the Gartner hype cycle are still true, are still relevant. So, you know, things really exciting. So it's blockchain or it's AI and you're throwing it out, and then reality hits, and it's maybe not quite as easy as you thought it was. And maybe it takes more, and particularly from an AI perspective, that's where you start to throw in all the ethics and all that side of things. So yeah, things have got faster. Yes, some things have been possible. So AI is not a new thing, but the capabilities now that we have from a processing perspective and our GPUs and all this kind of thing from a systems research perspective has now come to light, which means that we can do the AI that we couldn't do before because it was too long to possible. So lots of promises, things have moved, but I think the reality is just not quite as straightforward. And some of that is actually not about the technical change, but it's about the people change, isn't it? You know, it's about it's all very well having something really fancy, but if you've still got really rubbish processes, then actually you're not bringing any value to a business, or you're not bringing that change. You're just I don't know, making something prettier, but actually it still takes just as long. So there's something in there. I think the skills and needing to have a greater variety of skills, there's in the last 5 years, definitely people are different, they're more rounded. There was that, it was a while back now, it's probably 10 years ago, actually Gartner talked about, was it Gartner or McKinsey? Anyway, one of them were talking a lot about the versatilist, which is a horrible word to try and say, but people who are more than just a specialist, if that makes sense. That doesn't mean that there isn't room for specialisms. There absolutely is, and really are so important in technology, but actually that ability to potentially move and to bring in a wider skill set, to bring in emotional intelligence, to bring in those sort of things to the job that you do and to the successes that you might have when teaming.
Definitely. And sort of building on that, what are the opportunities and challenges that face people in the current work climate and that they can sort of utilize as well?
So lots of things. I think one of the things that's going to be really tricky, and I'm not actually sure what the technology answer is to this, so I'm not sure this really answers the question, so forgive me. But I think the managing the virtual and the in-person, the hybrid, and by that I don't mean the fact that my hybrid work as in I will be maybe 2 days here and 3 days there or something like that. What I mean is, what if we have 10 people in the room but we have another 20 people who are not? Because that is really, really difficult to do. I remember back when I was at university, which is far too long ago now, you know, having conversations around about that and what do we do, and you know, looking at things like holograms, and is there a way to bring people who are remote together with the people who are actually there in person? So I think we're maybe not quite at the hologram stage yet, but yeah, there is a role for technology. I'm just not in it when it comes to that kind of thing. I think some of the other things, though, absolutely around about environment. So Dylan's already mentioned, you know, we've got a couple of events coming up related to environment. Obviously, COP26 is a really big thing. Sustainability, responsible computing. You'll hear Rashik, who's really close involved in BCS, talk a lot about IBM's initiative on responsible computing and what can we do. And actually, there is a role for all of us to be thinking about what does that mean. And in some ways, that's about technology allowing us to do things we haven't done before, allowing to do things more effectively, whether that's monitoring our technology, managing our technology, using our resources in a much better way. But actually there's a responsibility on us and skills in terms of the skills that we develop so that we are using technology in a more ethical way too. And I mean ethical in terms of the impact on the environment. We've got the other impact on people too, which is a slightly separate issue. But yeah, definitely that responsible computing as an, you know, is should I be building something that does consume an awful lot of technology? What about have I worked out a way to make sure that things are getting switched off, for example, when they're not needed? So I think there's some questions around there, and I think that's something that for us as technical professionals to think about our impact, the things that we're doing with the environment.
Definitely,
and yeah, there's the sorry.
No, yeah, no, it's a new lens, I think, that we haven't had to think about before. But definitely in computing and tech, it's a huge one. Because I mean, the server rooms use so much electricity. It's, you know, give off so much heat. It's crazy.
even just things like what are we doing to manage our email better? You know, we suddenly end up with an unlimited capacity, and
Yeah.
and so we don't manage it. You know, and I remember the days of I don't use the desktop application anymore, usually anyway. But if I think about when in previous years with email within IBM, the system was notes, and most people will know that it comes with its own reputation. I actually really like notes. For those of you, it was the very first technology email technology I used at Scottish Hydroelectric. Anyway, summer job. As by the by, one of the things we always had a limit on how much email we could have, and every now and again you archive and you delete and all that kind of thing. Now, because it's easy, people just don't bother, including me. And you know, totally irrelevant stuff sitting in on email server somewhere that just don't need to be there. So we could be using technology better to manage that as well, frankly. You know, some of it is not always the it's not necessarily the bleeding edge stuff. It's more about what have we got and how are we joining up in a better way so that it can be more effective.
Yeah, definitely. And then with a strong sort of other priority on diversity at the moment, how can we basically increase gender diversity and inclusion in the workspace? And I know you were sort of co-wrote a book as well, so maybe you want to talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, I'll do hello to, because I know there's at least, I think there's at least one other person from that group of authors, and I've just realized it's getting really dark in the room, so forgive me people, but I'm going to switch the lights on because suddenly it's not summer anymore in Scotland. Normally we get light till 11 o'clock and it's a bit rubbish, and I know it gets quite dark in here, so forgive me while I just switch the light on. But diversity, oh yeah, where do we begin? There's so much to do, and that's partly why we wrote the book. So for those who are interested in getting it, as a practical guide, so it's not just theoretical, but gives some suggestions of things we can do, and there are lots of them. I guess actually what I would say is it's everybody's responsibility, right? So diversity and inclusion. So inclusion is everybody's responsibility, and I often try and say that rather than just the diversity piece, because diversity might have people who look different to you, who think differently to you, have had different experiences in life to you. But if you don't create a culture, a team, a workplace, a school, a university that is inclusive, then that diversity will disappear. If there is something that is dominant, you know, where there is a majority that might behave in a certain way or might look in a certain way, and chances are if you look a certain way, they'll probably behave a certain way too. Like that diversity will disappear because it will not feel included. It will not feel part. It won't feel like it belongs. So I would say inclusion is everybody's responsibility, and I would say get comfortable with being uncomfortable, having uncomfortable conversations. It's not easy. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a big fan of uncomfortable conversations. I like to be the nice person and everybody gets on. I really do find it uncomfortable having those and being the person who might say, look, if what you said, I don't know if you understood that the impact it might have had on some people, but maybe there's another way to phrase it, or that kind of thing. I think particularly if we're talking about gender, men just you're just going to have to get uncomfortable and start to understand that some things that are said, certain ways that of behavior, certain characteristics actually aren't typical of women, and we don't necessarily feel like a place is somewhere we can belong. So that's partly why I was thinking when I contributed, I did an awful lot around about retention, because I feel really passionately about the fact that if we don't create a place where people belong, then they'll just go, even if we've worked really, really, really hard to recruit. So the answer is it's everybody's responsibility. So if you are a person who is privileged by being the majority, I know that's used in a very specific way around about people of color. Privilege doesn't mean you have it easy, and I think that's something maybe we should make really clear. Privilege does not mean your life is easy. Privilege does not mean that nothing's been hard. does not to make sure I get all my negatives the right way around. Privilege, particularly in a colour context, is that you haven't been disadvantaged because of your colour. Is essentially what privilege means, or certainly it's usually what people mean in that scenario. So I recognise that I come with an awful lot of privilege. I'm a woman, but I come with an awful lot of privilege that that other women don't have, and other men don't have, or men don't have as well, depending on background and that kind of thing. So yes, so much stuff to do. So yeah, the pipeline. So what I would say is, if there's an area that you feel really interested in or feel really passionate about, you know, give your time to that. So because you can't do everything. So that might be helping kids understand how to code. Coding is not everything. It's absolutely not everything. But it is good to make sure that, in particular, when it comes to girls versus boys, that girls feel comfortable with coding. There's too many people say that they're not technical, and that kind of reflects its way back. So I would say, if you feel comfortable with kids, if you have children of your own, brownies, all that kind of thing, maybe coding is an opportunity. And I'm just throwing out a little snippets here because there's a book with lots. so that sort of thing could be really interesting. I think role models are really important as well. So to get young people into university studying STEM, then absolutely role models particularly help. Stories of why technology is relevant are really important. So not just, oh yeah, you can spend your life compiling, doing this, compiling and whatever. It's not just, the job isn't just being a developer. The job is building technology that helps. Let me think of an example. I was trying to think of a public sector example, and I thought, oh no, we probably shouldn't do that one because it's a COVID one and it's not always a popular one. But think of the outcomes of technology. So I remember once speaking to university about smarter cities and the fact that what the impact we can have, we can join data up. So maybe an example being, if you understood where there is more of an elderly population in a city, then you might prioritize gritting that area over somewhere where there's a lot of youth. Having said that, you might also want to prioritize the routes to school. But when you start talking about the impact, I remember there was a number of attendees who were doing maths, and they'd been told that their careers were accountants, maths teachers, and that was pretty much it. And like, well, actually, there's a whole world of technology that you'll understand because you can do problem solving really well. So I think stories can be really useful. Tell positive stories about the impact of technology, and find the areas that people are passionate about when it comes to ethics and making difference and responsibility. I would say when it comes to interviewing, so if you're a team lead, if you're somebody who might be recruiting a manager, make sure that the pool of people that you're going to be recruiting is as diverse as possible. Now, you should still be recruiting the right person for the job, but make sure that your pool is as diverse as possible, because you'll have a greater chance of hiring diverse people. And when I say the best person for the job, that doesn't always mean the person that is going to fit in with the team. Because one of the reasons that diversity is so successful, when we have better economic results, we have better innovation, is because we have to work harder together, right? Now, I love a team that just gets on and it just works. I've joined one recently and it's just really nice. You have, I didn't know them all that well. Turns out we have a lot in common in terms of the way we think and we approach. Trust is very important to us, which is always a good start for any team, I think. But it doesn't mean that every team is going to be you just get on, because what the diversity might bring is a different way of thinking, a new challenge, and overall better success for the team. So it's not about fitting in. If you have a team that's particularly loud and you're going to recruit somebody and you think, oh, they're awfully quiet, well, it's not their responsibility to suddenly become the sunshine, the extrovert, the gregarious person. It's your responsibility to make sure that they have something to it's your responsibility to make sure they're heard. Because you're going to recruit them because of their experience and because of their skills and that kind of thing. So I would say recruitment, make sure diverse pool, and make sure that when you're recruiting, it's not just somebody who looks like you. I think, and role models are really important as well. So let's put women in front of men. Let's put women in front of boys as well. So if I'm invited to speak to school, I don't like to just speak to the girls. I like to speak to the boys. And I know I'm being very binary here with my genders, but you get the point, right? Let's show boys that women can be really successful and that they haven't had to fight, or maybe hide some of those fights, make them a little bit less obvious to other people. That was just a bit of drivel as it all came off. I did actually write more about notes with a bit more clarity, but there's just so much for everyone to do, and I think it's everybody's responsibility. In the tech world in the UK, figures are around about 20% for women. If you leave it to the women to do, not much has changed. I hate to think how awful the situation would be if women hadn't been working on this. So let's bring the men in to have the conversation as well.
Definitely. Thank you very much for answering all of our questions. Now is the sort of point in the night where we turn to the audience. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A section, or potentially you might even be able to take you off mute if that's possible, technology wise, I'm not sure. And you can
we can do that. If they raise their hands, then we can do it.
Great. So yeah, raise your hand and we can take you off mute and you can ask the question yourself. So we have one, which I now can't find. It's in the chat. So Andrea, do you want to ask your question yourself, or should we just ask it from the chat? Okay, perfect. I think they've raised their hand as well.
Hi. Hi, hopefully you can hear me okay.
Can indeed, yes.
Great. Thanks, really great discussion and talk so far, really enjoying it. But my question is, do you think in the software engineering community, those who are already in it, that we need to show that there's more paths to what you can do to those who are starting out? And I say that because having sort of volunteered in schools, and when they're running their kind of career finder courses, it's very much computer programmer. There seems to be quite old in terms of what career profiles they suggest, and they don't even know what exists almost. So I'm just wondering, what do you think could be done in that space, or to show there's so much more out there?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I have a slide deck I often use that when I get asked about careers, that kind of thing. And I've spoken to careers advisors in Scotland actually about this. Not all of them, just a small group. But yeah, it's like hands up who thinks this is the job, when it has developer in the middle. And then it just spins out. And actually, I've intentionally for that chart, I still pick roles that I would think are more technical in nature. Definition of technical is kind of a tricky one sometimes, but maybe they'll be more likely to lead to CITP, Chartered IT Professional, perhaps, than some of the others. Maybe that would be one way of defining it. So yes, so you're absolutely right. So often the view is out of date, and one of the biggest challenges we have actually as parents, because parents don't know and they don't understand, and therefore they think the jobs are coders as well, and also their influence is very often what's on television, and that's not always that helpful either. Yes, we absolutely need to do more about that. Some of that is about stories. I think we can talk about the way we approach things. So much of what we do now as a larger technical community is actually develop as you know, well, I'm telling you what you already know, right? But is develop with the users, right? And we bring our sponsor users in, and when we bring stakeholders in, we bring business people in, and we develop, whether it's you're using agile methods, whatever the IBM has a garage method that makes sure that actually anything we do is with the user. And I remember sitting in a hackathon, and one of the software engineers that was there was going, "This is amazing, because I'm actually being able to develop for the first time by speaking to somebody who really really has a problem, as opposed to suddenly getting requirements and, you know, and not actually knowing where they came from. So I think there's perhaps we could do a better job of talking about that. Maybe there is a role for BCS to do a bit more of that. I think Paul Fletcher's in the thing, so I probably shouldn't commit us to too much. And that we will be doing things as BCS that, despite the fact that I've got far more involved than last year, that I won't even know that we're doing, and that's really my responsibility to fix and to address. But I think you're absolutely right. There is, we as a community could do more to talk about the variety of roles that might even be technology roles. So often what we do, particularly from a gender perspective, we try and say, oh, it's not just technical roles, you know, there's business analysts, you know, we need people in marketing and that kind of thing. And yeah, we do. And actually very often marketing is very male dominated in technology as well. But you know, passionately myself is about bringing women into roles that might be considered more technical. So I guess I'm really agreeing with you rather than giving you an absolute answer. But I think maybe there's more for BCS to think about on that. Does that help, Andrea?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. Thank you. And sorry, I just dived into the question and didn't even introduce myself, but yeah, it's Andrea speaking, and thanks very much.
No, my pleasure, my pleasure. And if you've got any ideas, by the way, you know, I do know that BCS as a community, shall we say, put it that way, I'm really interested in the ideas of where we can all make a difference as well. And that gets so, you know, you'll be pushing on an open door if you see something that's a good thing to do.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much.
Hi, if I could jump in here. Sharon, you're an exceptional person. You have got a FBCS, which means that you're a fellow of the British Computer Society, but you've also got something which I don't recognize as a BCS certification, MBE. What's that about?
Yes, yeah, thank you. Yeah, so that is an honour from the Queen. I actually got mine from Prince Charles. No, good grief, Prince William. Just pick a prince and get it right eventually, Sharon. For services to women in technology, I have no idea who nominated me for it. I have my suspicions. People I've asked have all said no, but I have my suspicions of who might have put my name forward, and that it really is about the women in tech things. So I've been involved with BCSWomen for a while. Where I got some real friends and mentors there. Some of them are on the session today, and they really have been mentors and really encouraged. And I think that it has been a recognition of just getting on with doing something. I think it's kind of the way I see it. So yeah, running events, getting people together. I think one of the things that I have really missed is bringing women together. I mean, we've done it virtually. We absolutely have done it virtually. But you know, when you just walk into a room and you're not the only one, and I think there'll be a few women who know what I'm saying, and there will be people with other diverse characteristics or protected characteristics who will potentially understand what I'm saying as well. But when you know you're not the only one, I know that some of the networking side of things we have missed. On the other hand, doing some things virtually has made things accessible to some people that would have not had accessibility to before. So yeah, so the MBE is related to that, and I, you know, if it wasn't for people like Gillian Arnold, for example, encouraging me to get more involved, saying we do everything in London, anyone want to do something somewhere else, and that's where I started getting involved in BCSWomen in Edinburgh. Yeah, a number of people just go for it. One of the pieces of advice I didn't talk about, in fact actually that's because I didn't write it down, that was dreadful, is the whole asking for forgiveness and not asking for permission. side of things. I got that from, it turns out that they're not the original person who said it, but it was somebody who was an IBMer. Chris Winter is hugely involved with BCS and really instrumental in changes. He was a fellow at IBM, which is an incredibly big deal. Very, very, very few folk become fellows at IBM, and it really is the influence on the industry. But he was the first person to say to me, I'd not heard of it before, ask for forgiveness, not permission. Basically, just get on and do things that you think are the right thing to do. And that's a very long way to answer your question.
Well, that's a stunning answer. And in terms of asking permission and so on, just want to pick something in terms of IBM. IBM, we all know that the home base is in the US. Do you find that being in the UK means that you're following the US, or is the UK truly a big innovative center as far as your organization is concerned, as well as the US?
Oh, I think there's a huge amount of innovation in the UK. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, for every global company is going to have, or America-based company is definitely going to have influence in America, and a huge amount of innovation there. But yeah, there's been a lot that's come out of the UK. I mean, you've got Rosie speaking about Mayflower, you know, and the involvement that IBM in the UK has had. It's not just IBM in the UK, but we're absolutely part of that team. And using, you know, Mayflower the new Mayflower, for those of you who know about the old Mayflower, to understand much more about the ocean, things that we really don't know now. So yeah, there's a lot. We have research labs and development labs based here in the UK, and we kind of separate the two developments much more about product development. Research is earlier in that, and like I say, we separate those out as organizations. They have a slightly different focus, and the way that a lot of people would maybe put R&D together. There's lots. I mean, if you look at our base in Hursley, which is not our UK base as such, but you know, where we have an office, there's a lot that has come out of there and continues to come out of there, whether it's to do with kicks and you know, all the number of transactions that we process for banks worldwide. And that's a UK development. Whether it's the Winchester drive, I'm really searching the archives now, haven't I? But you know, the Winchester drive, again, Winchester is named like that for a purpose. So yeah, and I really do think that we're continuing to innovate here in the UK as well. But we are a global company, so we get access to teams from all over the world, and you get to work with all sorts of folks from all sorts of places. So where does the innovation come out of? Well, everywhere.
Great. We've got another question from David, which is a question from one of his students. For a 16-year-old, what three things would you advise them to learn?
That is a very good question. Oh, I really need to think about that. I'm not very good with silence. There's too many things to learn. I think so one of them would be about learn how to approach people. Not everyone feels comfortable asking in person, so technology can help with that these days, obviously, we know that. But I think learning how to approach people is really important, because we all have to do it and we all have to work together. So it's not about just, you know, I think that people side of things is almost more important than the technology. Some of my colleagues probably wouldn't agree. For me, it's hugely important. So being able to approach people, being able to work with people is very important. I know some people find that more natural than others. So it's find your way of being able to do that, I guess. And would probably be one of them. And in terms of technology, it's more about understanding how to solve problems, I think. So pick your coding language of choice. It's about understanding how to solve problems. So actually, you know, it's English, Lit, if you do history, there's a whole bunch of subjects that can help with that dissecting and solving problems. And as we have to work with people and solve problems with people, I guess those two things kind of go hand in hand. I'm not sure if you were actually wanting soft skills answers. I just appear to have done that naturally. But yeah, so a technology that you like, but is really around about problem solving. I need to think a bit more about what the third one is.
Great. Another question from Elizabeth. So they are a software engineer who is in the process of switching career to teaching secondary computing. How would you suggest I keep up to date, in brackets, other than BCS webinars, which are great?
Oh, I would suggest BCS webinars. That's not helpful, is it? Because that's your network thing, isn't it? Yeah. Am I allowed to say the register? There's probably lots of different answers to that question, Elizabeth, and I would really need to think about it a bit more. However, I would say resources like the register, for example. So if we put the BCS aside, because it's not just about the webinars, but actually there's a huge amount of education there around about keeping your skills up to date that's available. There's community events, go to the branches, get speaking to people, all that kind of stuff. I'm just going to lump as a BCS answer, which you've said you don't really want because you've got that already. I would say things like the register or other high profile newsletters and sources of information that can tell you where things are going. And I know there's an awful lot of that's where the gossip lies, right? And there absolutely is gossip in there. We totally get that, but actually there's some really useful information in there about the realities of technologies and the realities of careers, and that, which I think could be particularly useful. So I would potentially use resources a bit like that, whether it's Computing or Computer Weekly or those kind of thing, just for the currency. I don't know if that's helpful, but I'll throw that out there as a suggestion. Feel free if you've got other questions or you want to correct me, then please let me know, Elizabeth.
Great. I think that's all of the ones that we have so far, unless there are any others anyone would like to ask.
Yeah, Christine has put a really good point in that I think would maybe go back to David for one of your students, and that is, what are they actually currently learning? I don't know if David, if you want to either come on or maybe even just pop in the chat or something like that and tell us a little bit more about what they're learning.
Hi, David Finnan here, Thomas Payne sixth form in Thetford. So the students are, right now we're doing the BTEC computing qualification, and so they're doing a mixture of sort of C# programming to learn the sort of the fundamentals, and then we go on and learn the LAMP stack to develop websites. So that's kind of the technology that they're learning. But we've also got to learn about cybersecurity, how to secure systems, but we've also got to have a vocational focus. We've got to actually interact and work with businesses and understand their needs. So that's a summary of what we're doing at sixth form.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I guess some of the things I think about of the fundamentals of computing as well are going to always help you. So no matter which language you're learning, and it sounds like they will be getting a lot of that through what they're doing anyway, but some of the fundamentals of computing and how things work. I tell you what, not even for a 16-year-old, but actually for some of your 16-year-olds, get them to take a laptop apart. If they haven't done that before, get them to take a laptop apart or a desktop apart or something like that, so that they can understand and touch and feel, because that's one of the things we never did. And I didn't have a family that was technical at all. And I know I'm a lot older, it's a different generation than some of the kids coming through now, but there's still this thing where people don't really know what it looks like inside, whether it's your phone or whatever. I wouldn't recommend trying to take your iPhone apart, but you do you know what I mean? Giving people the confidence to just play and touch and even to break maybe not an expensive iPhone. I think there's, particularly if we're starting to talk about women and gender and girls and that kind of thing, I think a lot of kids don't get exposed to what it looks like under the covers, and it might not be that they're going to have a future as a hardware engineer, right? But just understanding some of that stuff, I think, actually really important. And if you've done that already or it happened earlier in school, then forgive me.
No, thank you for that. It was really useful, actually, and I think you're quite right. That sort of that hands-on thing is really key. And I did mention, Adam, that obviously we do all the sort of fundamentals of sort of decomposition, abstraction, and everything else. But the exam boards do insist on us doing lots and lots of pseudocode.
It's been a while since I wrote pseudocode, but I love it.
Thank you very much for that. I think that's some takeaways. So thank you.
Fab, thanks. Give me a shout if you think there's then something else I could do usefully or answer for you as well.
Okay, well, if I could just jump in here. I know there are many members of BCSWomen here, as well as other BCS groups. Would you like to say anything in terms of some of the activities of your groups, or of some of the great things that we're doing in BCS? Or another topic, BCS, IT, racing ahead, and it's all go, 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 isn't it? But do we know where we're going? Do we really want to get there? And what will happen if something goes wrong? What about the ethical side of things? These are also issues that are relevant to today's world. Any questions or any thoughts in terms of those things?
Yeah, the ethics thing is so important these days. Unfortunately, we're getting an increasing sort of focus on it in general, but I think it's still not necessarily understood. And it's not understood because it is hard, right? We haven't necessarily been forced to think about these things. And you still get that perception of, well, it only affects a few of us, so it really can't be all that important to have to fix or to change or to deal with or to think about. Actually, it maybe affects a whole lot more than you think. But even if it doesn't, does that are they less relevant? Are they less important? Do they have less value than you do just because there's fewer of them, whatever they may be? Yeah, huge area. For a few years ago, I found that, you know, every other week I was getting an email, maybe not every other week, every other month, I was getting an email from somebody at university or a student, you know, who was doing their dissertation, and they were doing it on women in tech and what the problems were and all that kind of thing. I'm expecting, I've seen some, but expect to see far more now on around about the ethics and technology, because one of the questions I posed was at COGEX a couple of years ago, was like, well, we very often forgive a human, but will we forgive a computer if they get it wrong? And let's not forget, it's mostly humans that are behind the computers. So yeah, really interesting. I don't know if I don't want to put any on the spot, but there's a couple from BCSWomen who probably have an opinion on that side of things as well. One of the things I think, I'm just going to waffle for a minute. One of the things that has been really positive out of IBM, an extracurricular activity that some folks did, and it largely came out of somebody just asking a question. Do you know what? We've not really thought about this before, but round about technology and coercive control, and how a number of the technologies that we have, the apps that we can get our hands on, can actually be used in a really horrifically abusive situation. Whether that's monitoring what people are doing and whether they're at home and what they're doing with the heating, you know, horrible stories about women in particular. And it won't always affect women, but women in particular who, you know, suddenly find that their house is very cold, and it's because their abusive partner is controlling the temperature and putting it low and making it uncomfortable for them at home. And so, I mean, I've never thought about that. I thought Hive was fantastic when I first thought I would live my own. Unfortunately, I have a partner who's not like that. But there are a number of technologies that we have our hands on we never think about. Actually, they're designed with the best of intentions, but can have some pretty horrific outcomes in the hands of the wrong people. So we've come up with a number of design, I say we, a group, I wasn't involved in, a group within IBM and IBM's TCG, Technical Consulting Group, pulled together these coercive control resistant design principles, and now it's been part of BCS, so BCS have included them in IT now, so you might have seen them there. They're you know, starting to make strides about making people think about these things all the time.
Okay, well, I see there are one or two other questions. I'm going to ask my colleague David Grundy. Are there any outstanding questions, David, that we need to cover before we wrap up this session?
We've got a comment from Ganiat. I think that it may be important to enable college students to attend conferences, or for colleges to run conferences and seminars where they learn more about the applicability of technology and the varied tech roles that exist.
Yeah, I completely agree. And so much is online now, and so much is available for free, that actually the problem will be picking one rather than finding one, if that makes sense.
David?
I think that's it now.
Okay, well, if it's okay with you, Sharon, I think we've reached a really nice point in the evening where we can wrap up. So let me thank very much our interviewer, Chloe, for putting those questions and her point of view about things, especially Sharon, to you for being so great and taking on this whole session and enlightening us and giving us your views in terms of all of the aspects of work and thought that you're going through now. And let me also thank, for example, our technical helpers, David and others, and even more so, the audience. You're in the audience. Thank you very much for being part of this session. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you'll come to the next ones too. Look forward to seeing you soon. Bye for now, and keep enjoying the wonderful world of BCS and making IT for society. Bye.
Bye, thank you.